Not all great ideas were made while sitting on the toilet. However, the idea to split from the Catholic Church and the second major great split of Christianity was formed while somebody was sitting on the toilet. Let's talk about that. It's true. What? It's true. Don't give me that look. So welcome back to another episode of Ridgway History. Today we're going to be looking at the second major split in Christianity, that of the Protestant Reformation. And we're going to be looking at how did the Protestant Reformation start, what did certain people believe, and then second, what were the effects of those split of those beliefs. So a couple of essential questions that we're going to be looking at today. Number one, how do religions change over time and space? You may be surprised that Christianity has really radically changed in the last 2,000 years since it was first conceived. And second, how do religion and politics mix? Religion and politics both have a role to play in the Protestant Reformation. Deciding which one had a greater influence is sometimes a really difficult thing to tease out. So the Protestant Reformation began when this guy just below me, right here, his name is Martin Luther, decided to nail 95 theses, or protests, against a church door in Wittenberg, Germany. Now, to get to this point, and to understand the context of why he did that, Catholic Christianity by 1500 was under a lot of pressure. There were issues with corruption, there were also some legally interesting, for historians, religious debates that were going on about certain church doctrine. So Mr. Martin Luther, not only because of political reasons, but also because of religious ones, decides that he's going to nail 95 protests on this church door in Germany. One of these was the granting of indulgences. So these are these were pieces of paper that allowed people to go and commit sins that they could then go pay for them to be forgiven. And you would be given what's called an indulgence. And they could also, interestingly enough, be bought for people that were already dead or in limbo or in heaven or in hell that could then you could then go and buy that indulgence and it would hopefully get them out of that situation. Martin Luther had a big problem with this because he saw it as a corruption of not only Catholic beliefs, but also he tied it to the corruption of larger church society. Martin Luther also had a problem with the idea of salvation through works, or the idea that you can only be saved through the things that you do. Martin Luther only believed that faith saved people. And if you go to many Protestant churches today, many of their mantras or main beliefs is that faith is the only thing that can save you. Martin Luther, though, also had an interesting one, which we'll have to come back to later, with the scientific revolution and the Enlightenment, which is that he believed that the Bible should be available for everyday people to read, not just to get through priests. Before this, to get the Word of God, you would have to go to a church and you would go to a lecture that was in Latin. So not only would you not understand it, because oftentimes the only language you would understand was your local language, but then number two is you actually couldn't take that Bible home and go and read it for yourself. Martin Luther basically wanted the Bible to be available in what's called the vernacular, or your everyday, immediate surrounding languages that you used. So in the Protestant Reformation, there's a few key areas that I think students should especially... In the Protestant Reformation, there's a few key areas that you should probably be aware of more than any other, and that is Ireland, England, and then probably Germany. Ireland would go on to have a huge amount of religious conflict that boils from this event. You probably may have heard something about Northern Ireland, but there's lots of really bloody conflicts, such as Bloody Sunday, or the Irish Republican Army, or lots of other interesting conflicts that happened during this time and during World War I and other events. Number two is London, which we're going to look at King Henry VIII here ever so briefly, and then also the German princes that you can see here circled on the map. You'll notice that most of the color here in Germany is pink for Lutheran, and we're going to talk about why Germany broke away from the Catholic Church. So what was the Protestant Reformation? Protestantism, the best working definition I can give you is the wave of religious dissent that goes across Europe throughout these couple of centuries. The Protestant Reformation quickly became not only a political issue, but also a religious one. So for example, King Henry VIII, you can see right above me, he, after marrying his first wife and being unable to get a male heir, asked the Catholic Church for a divorce, and King Henry VIII was quite a devout Catholic. However, the Catholic Church said no, so King Henry decided to use the growing Protestant Reformation to break from the Catholic Church in order to grant himself a divorce, and therefore, hopefully, birth a male baby. That area of Germany that you saw on the map is also an interesting area because German princes used the Protestant Reformation to break free from the Pope, and especially to break free from having to pay him money. Which, if there's one thing that's going to cause people to break and do things for certain motivations, it is money. One important thing to also know about the Protestant Reformation is that the Protestant Reformation is kind of like a carton of Pringles. Once you pop, you just can't stop. Because after the Protestant Reformation begins, it just fractures and fractures and fractures, and it never stops fracturing. So what happens, and this happens all over the world, is that people will go and create new churches, and then a couple of people will have problems with what those churches believe, and then they'll go off and create their own new churches. So for example, we get brand new religions that had never been heard of before at this time, such as Calvinists, Anabaptists. This is also where Methodists come from, Lutherans, Quakers. All of these ideas come from the Protestant Reformation. And again, once they start splitting, there's no way to stop them from further splitting. So what were the big doctrinal differences between the Catholic Church and Luther's ideas? I want you to keep and pay careful attention to the ideas of salvation and then how belief is revealed. Because other than that, they're generally pretty close. So in Catholicism, salvation, and how it had been for many centuries before, is achieved through faith and good works. However, Martin Luther thought that salvation could only come through one's faith. And the other important part that I want to make sure that you come away leaving with is that how belief is revealed. So priests interpret the Bible and church teachings for the people in Catholicism, but in Lutheranism, people read and interpret the Bible for themselves. Scandalous. One important thing to mention, though, is that Catholics just didn't sit by while the Protestant Reformation happened. They do attempt to counter Protestantism militarily, politically, religiously, in pretty much, any way possible that they can. And one interesting way that's kind of new and probably you might have heard of is the Jesuit movement. And this actually comes out of what is called the Catholic Counterreformation, where Catholics not only try to reform some of the problems in their own church, but then try to go out and try to convert and reform ideas of Catholicism elsewhere. You can see here a picture of two Catholic missionaries that are actually over in Japan, and indeed Jesuit missionaries would travel all over the world to go spread the ideas of Catholicism during the Catholic Counter-Reformation. Again, it's just important to know that Catholics just didn't sit by while the whole Protestant Revolution thing was going on. So that's all the time I have today for Ridgway history. If you like this video, check out the other ones that I have on the channel. Might find some helpful. Other than that, I've included down in the description today two other things here that you might find interesting. One is a study on religious syncretism, because at the same time the Protestant Reformation is going on, there's this new crazy thing called religious syncretism, which results in some strange stuff you might have heard of before called voodoo. And then the second thing that I've also included down there is other changes going on at this time, which is the scientific revolution. And I encourage you to check out both of them. Also, a special shout out to Cameron for helping me write the script for this episode. Other than that, I will see you in the next video. Bye bye!